but leaving that aside for a moment, so would that then, because in my experience with LaTeX, you have all these different tools for generating the LaTeX, right? You have they all have very similar names, so I get them confused. But like PDF LaTeX, and you have X, whatever it is, one, and you know what I mean. Like you have all these generators that generate the PDFs, right? So you would generate the PDF, but would that mean that people would have to use a certain implementation of LaTeX or implementation of the generation algorithm or whatever, and to use your tool?
Okay. Well, let me first of all say that every LaTeX document has a preamble, which roughly speaking says these are the commands that I'm using in addition to the normal ones. So AMS Math is a very common preamble that allows you a lot of mathematical support and millions of symbols, hundreds and hundreds of symbols. And there's all sorts of manner of things put into the preamble, including font sizes and so forth. I'm not going to deal with the preamble at all. I'm just going to say this document is accessible for some definition of accessible. And I'm not going to deal with the output.
That makes a lot of sense, because you're going to throw away a lot of complexity. Then you're going to get around a lot of the complexity, because a lot of the, every time you generate a LaTeX document, it's like, or a PDF, it's like, HBox out of bounds and all this kind. You could just throw all of that away and just look at the structure of the document. That makes sense to me, I suppose. Okay, cool. It's like a pre-processor kind of a thing or something like that. Yeah.
Well, from one point of view, it's an accessibility, it's some sort of checker, and it should provide some sort of useful feedback. From another point of view, it's defining what non-garbage is as input. And so it's an amazing fact that every nut fits every bolt. I don't mean literally, but interchangeable parts. And it's amazing fact. And that's done about through having standards. And similarly, when we plug the kettle in, we expect the plug to fit the socket. And we expect the electricity to fit the device. And in some sense, I want to get some sort of minimal standard on which most tools will work well, or work properly. And that's why I've got this sort of focus on the one-page document that just does a few things. And from that point, I sort of what made photography take off as a mass market thing was Kodak. And Kodak had two good things. The one is that it had a very, very strong brand name. It was an invented word, and it's a very, very strong brand name. The other thing is that it had a way of dealing with the photography. You got the camera, you took your photographs, you sent the camera back, and you got the photographs back. So it made it quite straightforward. And previously, photography was glass plates and chemicals and who knows what else. So I'm trying to make something simple that allows somebody who simply wants to produce one page of mathematics that is accessible to work. And my goal, I think, is to put a standard on the input in the hope that some of the tools will provide outputs. And if there's a bit of competition amongst the tools, that's not a bad idea. Kelly?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm curious if there's currently a written version of what you're trying to provide. Like, is there a style guide anywhere for math that doesn't check your document, but if you were inclined to read it, would provide you guidelines on how to best write mathematical formulas?
There is to a certain extent. Leslie Lamport's book says always put curly braces around your subscripts and superscripts and use backslash open and backslash close parenthesis instead of dollar math dollar. And the various other guides. And there are a few other things. So in a sense, what you're saying is what's the state of the art? And there is existing art. There is existing, but it's limited. Nelson will tell us that you shouldn't have very long lines of text in your document because it makes things difficult. And it does make things difficult, but it doesn't change the abstract syntax tree. I wanted to say something about a web application or a command line application. I think a web application is the way to go in terms of getting users, but it's hard work to get it going, particularly if you're going to make it work solely in the browser rather than having a server at the back end. And so I'm going to start with command line because that will allow me to define the thing better. And the command line, so to speak, gives a better balance when you've only got 6 users. When you've got 1,000 users, that's not yet, then having a web application looks a lot different.
This might be a silly question, but can you build it into the LaTeX compilation process itself, so that as you're creating your LaTeX files, you can just check them immediately, so you get instant feedback as to whether you have specific accessibility issues?
Fitting it into the compilation process is not difficult. The compilation process is, here's a sequence of commands, do them one after the other. What is difficult is feeding back into the IDE. And in a certain sense, the best way to do that is to put squiggles in the LaTeX source indicating problematic ideas, problematic constructions. So you want an analog of the blue and red squiggles. When I say squiggle, I mean the underlines that you get when there's a spelling error or a grammar error or something like that. So to get that into the output, you either need to integrate it into the IDE, and I'm inclined to go for Visual Studio because that's used by a lot of blind people, visually impaired people. Or the other way to do it is to put it into the web page, is to put it into web page. So a useful halfway house would be to write a report on the page that displays in your browser, on your local browser. Before we started recording, you said something about Blackboard and accessibility tools and your professional interest in accessible math. And I wonder if you'd like to say a bit more about that, Simon. I'm sure it'd be very helpful.
Sure. Yeah, for those that are not familiar with the tool, so Blackboard Ally, it usually slots in the learning management systems of universities or schools, and it goes through all the content in the course, all the PDFs, the Word documents, whatever, and it checks for common accessibility issues in those documents. And then it gives detailed feedback to instructors on how to remedy them. It will give you a little traffic light indicator as to how accessible we think the file is. And then it gives you some guidance for certain tools like Microsoft Office or LibreOffice in case of a Word file, and then tells you what buttons to click. And that works okay if the PDF was authored in those tools, but obviously if it's in LaTeX, we don't have any guidance because, to be quite honest, I don't know what to suggest to our users. So that's currently why I'm here, to learn more. But that's what our tool does. So that's sort of it's a way to educate instructors on making their course content more accessible. That's one component. The other component of it is we want to generate alternative formats for that content. So you might have a PDF file, it might have some math in it. We then generate an HTML file for it through, if it's untagged, through some computer vision and some machine learning. And then that spits out an HTML file. In our currently available offering, we don't convert the math formulas yet because we're frankly not good enough at it yet. But one of the things we want to focus on is PDFs authored in LaTeX, because they're usually quite well typeset and they're usually quite well distinguishable. And then convert those, but all of that would go through like a computer vision pipeline and machine learning. So it would be, as you said, garbage in, garbage out. So it's not going to be optimal. One of the things we're looking at is if you feed it just LaTeX files, whether we can pull those formulas out and then provide alternative formats for those. It's all, I mean, all of this is very much still in the exploration and the R&D phase, but that's currently what we're looking at, and hence the interest in this topic.